My mother leaned across the white tablecloth at a high-end steakhouse, whispering that sentence to my dad as if I was completely deaf. It was my 33rd birthday dinner. They thought because the restaurant was loud and I was leaning over to read the dessert menu, I couldn't hear a single word. They had no idea that I heard every single syllable, and they certainly had no idea that I owned the building. Look, there is cold-hearted betrayal, and then there is scheming against your own daughter on her birthday while cutting into a $70 ribeye she paid for. My mom was actually instructing my father to coordinate with my golden child brother, Marcus, to lock me out of my own home. Why? Because in her mind, a single, independent 33-year-old woman didn't need a 2-bedroom apartment in the city when Marcus and his pregnant girlfriend were paying high rent across town. They thought they were pulling off the ultimate stealth takeover. They had no clue that the quiet, dutiful daughter sitting across from them was about to drop a legal hammer that would leave them all stranded. Okay, so, let me back up for a second, because to understand how insane this was, you have to know the family dynamic. If you're new here, subscribe. I post a new story every day. My name is Erin, and for as long as I can remember, my brother Marcus was the absolute center of my parents' universe. Marcus could do no wrong. When he dropped out of college, my parents bought him a car to boost his morale. When he lost his 3rd job in 2 years, my parents paid his back rent. Meanwhile, I worked 2 jobs through college, saved every penny, and managed to buy a multi-family property downtown when the market was low 6 years ago. It was a 4-unit building. I lived in Unit 2A and rented out the other 3. Because my family is incredibly boundary-pushing, I never outright told my parents that I owned the whole building. I just told them I was renting an apartment from a private landlord named Mr. Sterling. I knew if they found out I owned real estate, they would immediately demand I let Marcus live there rent-free. And guess what? My instinct was 100% right. So back to the birthday dinner. My mom, Brenda, was sitting there sipping her wine, smiling to my face, asking me how work was going. Then, while I turned my head toward the waiter, she leaned over to my dad, Arthur, and whispered, "Have your son change the locks at Erin's apartment tonight while we're at dinner. Marcus has the spare key she gave us for emergencies. Once his stuff is inside, she can't legally kick her own brother out." My dad just nodded, pulled out his phone under the table, and typed a quick text to Marcus. Now here's where I'd have lost it. I had to sit there for another 45 minutes pretending I hadn't heard a thing. My blood was boiling, but a strange, ice-cold clarity took over. Instead of screaming or making a scene at the restaurant, I excused myself to go to the restroom. I pulled out my phone and called my building superintendent, Joe, who lives in Unit 1A and handles security. I said, "Joe, my brother is at my door right now trying to drill out my locks. Call the police for an active burglary, and turn on the hallway security cameras." Joe didn't hesitate for a second. He said, "I'm on it, Erin. Would you have confronted your parents right at the dinner table, or would you have played it cool and let the trap snap shut like Erin did? Let me know in the comments below." I walked back to the dinner table, sat down, and calmly ordered dessert. My mom looked at me with this fake, sweet smile and said, "Erin, dear, you work so hard. You really should think about downsizing or sharing your place with family to save money." I looked her dead in the eyes, took a bite of cheesecake, and said, "I think my living situation is about to be taken care of, Mom." She smirked, thinking her little plan was already in motion. 15 minutes later, my dad's phone started ringing off the hook. It was Marcus. My dad answered, expecting Marcus to say the locks were changed and his boxes were inside. Instead, Marcus was practically hyperventilating over the receiver. "Dad, the police are here. They have me in handcuffs outside Erin's door. The super called them for break and enter." My dad gasped, almost knocking over his water glass. "What? Tell them you're her brother. Tell them you have permission." "I did," Marcus yelled back. The super showed them the lease. Erin is listed as the property manager and owner, and he said no unauthorized persons are allowed. Wait, read that part again in your head, because the shift in the room was instantaneous. My mother's face went completely ghost white. She stared at me, her mouth open like a fish out of water. You own the building." she stammered, her voice shaking. I wiped my mouth with my napkin, pulled out my wallet, placed enough cash on the table to cover my own meal, and stood up. Yes, Mom. I've owned it for 6 years. And since Marcus just attempted to break into a secure building on camera, he's currently being processed for trespassing and attempted burglary. Is there anything more satisfying than watching a sneaky family plot blow up in real time? Drop your thoughts down below. My dad jumped out of his chair, yelling at me right in the middle of the restaurant. How could you do this to your own brother? Call the police right now and drop the charges. He's your family. I looked at him calmly and said, he brought a locksmith kit to my apartment on my birthday because you told him to steal my home. You can explain that to the judge. I walked out of the steakhouse, leaving my parents staring at a giant dinner bill and a family disaster of their own making. By the time I got back to my building, 2 patrol cars were parked outside. Marcus was sitting in the back of a cruiser, glaring at me through the window while his pregnant girlfriend stood on the sidewalk crying. My parents pulled up 10 minutes later, screaming at the officers, claiming it was a family misunderstanding. I handed the police the security footage showing Marcus trying to pick my lock, along with my property deed proving I was the sole owner of the entire complex. Marcus was booked, and because my parents tried to interfere, the officers gave them a formal warning for disturbing the peace. In the days that followed, my parents tried everything: guilt trips, calling my relatives, sending crying voice notes begging me to drop the charges so Marcus wouldn't have a record. I didn't back down. I pressed charges for trespass and property damage. My brother ended up with probation, community service, and a mandatory fine, while his girlfriend moved back in with her own parents after realizing Marcus was completely penniless and reliant on his enabling mom. My parents tried to cut me off emotionally, threatening to disown me. I saved them the trouble. I blocked all 3 of them on everything, changed my emergency contact info, and put up extra security cameras around my property. I'll be honest, I didn't expect it to feel this good, but trimming away toxic family who view you as an object to be exploited is the ultimate weight loss. They thought they were playing a sneaky game of chess behind my back on my birthday, but they forgot one simple rule: you can't lock someone out of a house they built from the ground up. What do you think about how Erin handled her parents and brother? Was pressing charges against her own brother justified, or should she have let it go after exposing them? Drop your verdict in the comments section below. If you loved this story, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. I post a brand new narrative every single day. See you tomorrow. Wait, let's pause right here, because you have to realize just how fast a toxic family's entitlement turns into absolute hysteria when their golden child actually faces real-world consequences. The morning after Marcus spent the night in a holding cell, my phone started buzzing at 6 in the morning like an alarm clock from hell. It wasn't just one text or 2 missed calls, it was a coordinated assault from every single family member who had swallowed my mother's narrative over the last 10 years. My Aunt Sarah sent me a 3-page text message accusing me of being heartless, cruel, and a monster who put her own flesh and blood behind bars over a simple misunderstanding. Now here's where I'd have lost it: a simple misunderstanding. He brought a drill, a set of lock picks, and 4 heavy cardboard boxes to my front door on my birthday while my parents actively distracted me over a steak dinner. That's not a misunderstanding. That is an orchestrated, premeditated home invasion. I didn't answer a single text. Instead, I saved every single voicemail, took screenshots of every hostile message, and forwarded them directly to my attorney to add to the harassment file. At 9 in the morning, I heard a pounding on the security door at the main entrance of my building. I checked the security monitor on my kitchen wall, and there stood my father, Arthur, looking disheveled, red-faced, and furious. He was pressing the buzzer repeatedly, shouting into the intercom, "Erin, open this door right now. You've had your little power trip, now fix this." I didn't even open the glass door. I walked down the main hallway, stood on the other side of the reinforced glass entry, and looked him dead in the eye. I said, "Dad, you're trespassing on private property. If you don't leave in 30 seconds, Joe is calling the precinct again." My dad slammed his palm against the glass, his voice cracking. "He's your brother, Erin. He has a baby on the way. Do you have any idea what a criminal record does to a young man's future? Asterisk. I looked at him calmly through the glass and replied, maybe you should have thought about his future before you texted him to break into my home. Would you have stood your ground behind that glass door, or would you have opened it to confront your father face to face? Let me know in the comments below. That sentence hit him like a physical blow. His face went pale, realizing for the first time that I knew exactly what role he played at that steakhouse table. He tried to change his tone real quick, switching from aggressive shouting to pathetic begging. Erin, please, your mother hasn't stopped crying all night. She's sick over this. We were just trying to help Marcus get on his feet. We thought since you owned the building, you had extra space you weren't using. Asterisk. Wait, read that part again in your head, because the entitlement in that statement is utterly mind-boggling. They didn't care that I worked 80 hours a week for 6 straight years to buy that property. They didn't care that I paid the mortgage, the property taxes, the insurance, and the maintenance out of my own pocket. In their minds, because I am their daughter and I succeeded, my hard-earned assets automatically belong to the family collective, specifically to the son who refused to hold down a job. I looked at my dad through the glass and said, my vacant units are for paying tenants who respect my property. Marcus isn't getting a key, he isn't getting a lease, and he isn't getting out of those charges. I turned my back, walked up the stairs, and left him standing on the pavement outside. An hour later, my building manager, Joe, came up to my unit with a copy of the official police report and the downloaded camera footage from the hallway. The video footage was crystal clear, crisp 4K quality with full audio recording. It captured Marcus arriving at 7:15 p.m. while we were ordering appetizers at the steakhouse. It showed him pulling out a key my parents had duplicated without my permission, trying to insert it into my deadbolt, and realized I had rekeyed the locks 2 months prior for security. Then, and this is the absolute kicker, the audio caught him on the phone with my mother, Brenda, saying, Mom, the key isn't working. She changed the tumbler. Asterisk. And my mother's voice came right through his speakerphone saying, use the toolkit from the trunk, Marcus. Just get inside before she finishes her dessert. Asterisk. I mean, I knew my parents were enabling him, but hearing my own mother instruct my brother to break down my door in real time made my stomach turn into complete ice. When you catch family members caught red-handed on video like that, is there ever any going back? Drop a comment below. That video recording was the silver bullet. When Marcus's court-appointed public defender viewed the hallway footage, he immediately told my parents and Marcus that fighting the charges in court would be absolute suicide. The state prosecutor was prepared to charge him with felony burglary and attempted destruction of property. My brother was facing up to 2 years in county jail. Within 48 hours, my mother went from threatening to disown me to sending begging emails, offering to pay for all property damages, and promising that Marcus would leave the state if I agreed to sign a diversion agreement reducing the charge to a misdemeanor. I sat down with my attorney, evaluated my options, and decided to make them sign a binding legal agreement. I agreed to support the misdemeanor diversion program under 3 strict, non-negotiable conditions. First, Marcus had to pay $3,000 in full restitution for replacing the entire door frame and upgrading my security system. Second, both my parents and Marcus had to sign a legally binding 3-year restraining order prohibiting them from coming within 500 feet of my building or my place of work. And third, my mother had to sign a written confession acknowledging her role in orchestrating the break-in, which would be held on file by my attorney in case they ever tried to harass me again. When my attorney presented those terms to my parents, my mother broke down in tears, screaming that I was treating them like criminals. My attorney looked her straight in the eyes and said, "Ma'am, with all due respect, you are criminals. You're just fortunate your daughter is giving you an exit ramp." They had no choice. Marcus signed the paperwork, paid the restitution using money my parents had to take out of their own retirement fund, and my mother signed the confession with a shaking hand. The day the judge signed the restraining order was the quietest, most peaceful day of my entire adult life. I walked out of that courthouse, took a deep breath of fresh air, and realized something profound. Blood doesn't mean family, and loyalty isn't a one-way street where you give everything while they take until you're hollow. Sometimes, the best birthday gift you can ever give yourself is shutting the door on toxic people and changing the locks for good. Wait, if you think a signed restraining order and a $3,000 fine put an end to the family drama, you don't know how deep toxic entitlement runs. The ink was barely dry on that court document when the underground smear campaign started. My mother couldn't come within 500 feet of my building, but she had a whole phone book full of extended family members who were more than willing to do her dirty work for her. Within 48 hours of leaving that courthouse, my phone turned into a battleground of calls from aunts, uncles, and second cousins I hadn't spoken to in 5 years. My Aunt Clara called me at 8 on a Tuesday night, not even bothering to say hello before launching right into it. "Erin, how can you sleep at night knowing your poor mother had to pull $3,000 out of her savings while your brother is doing community service in an orange vest?" Asterisk. Now here's where I'd have lost it. I took a deep breath, leaned back on my sofa, and said, "Aunt Clara, did Mom happen to mention why Marcus is wearing that orange vest?" She hesitated for 2 seconds before scoffing. "She said you had a petty argument over an apartment lease and you called the police on your own brother out of spite." Asterisk. I smiled to myself, opened my laptop, and forwarded Aunt Clara the crystal clear security camera footage of Marcus trying to pick my lock, along with the audio file of my mom instructing him to break in. I said, "Check your email, Aunt Clara. Watch the video, listen to Mom's voice, and then decide if you want to keep playing her defense attorney." Wait, read that part again, because the silence on the other end of the line was absolute poetry. She didn't call back. In fact, she sent a one-line text 10 minutes later saying, "I had no idea. I am so sorry." Asterisk. Have you ever had to pull out receipts to completely silence relatives who were lied to about you? Let me know in the comments below. Once the truth started circulating through the family vine, the tables turned hard. My cousin stopped offering Marcus financial handouts, and my uncle pulled back on a job offer he had lined up for him at his logistics firm. Marcus was forced to take a night shift warehouse job just to pay off the restitution and legal fees he owed my parents, while his girlfriend moved back to her home state with her family, leaving him entirely on his own. Meanwhile, my own life started expanding in ways I never thought possible when I was carrying the weight of my family's financial demands. With the restraining order firmly in place, I decided to reinvest in my property. I renovated Unit 2B, the very apartment my mother had planned to steal for Marcus, and rented it out to a wonderful young couple who signed a 2-year lease at top market rate. That single move increased my monthly cash flow by an extra $1,800. I used that extra income to set up a private investment portfolio, securing my own future instead of bankrolling a golden child who never appreciated a single sacrifice. I'll be honest, I didn't expect what came next, but about 3 months after the court case closed, I bumped into my father at a local grocery store 3 towns over. He looked older, tired, and completely defeated. He didn't scream, he didn't make a scene, he just stood in the aisle holding a basket, looking at me with total regret. He whispered, "Erin, your mom and I are selling the family home. We can't afford the mortgage anymore after helping Marcus with his legal debts." Asterisk. I looked at him, feeling a small sting of pity, but the memory of him texting Marcus under the dinner table on my birthday came rushing right back. I looked him straight in the eyes and said, "Actions have consequences, Dad. You chose your side at that steakhouse table." I walked past him, paid for my groceries, and drove back home to a building that was 100% mine. When parents hit rock bottom because of their own bad choices, do you step in to save them, or do you let them lie in the bed they made? Drop your verdict below. Looking back on that whole nightmare, that birthday dinner was actually the greatest gift my parents ever accidentally gave me. If they hadn't gotten greedy and whispered that plan across the table, I might have spent another 10 years enabling them, hiding my success, and walking on eggshells around my own family. Their greed forced my eyes wide open, and their failure gave me my ultimate freedom. If there is one thing this whole experience taught me, it's that blood makes you related, but respect makes you family, and if people can't respect your boundaries, they don't deserve a seat at your table. Wait, let's talk about what happens when the people who tried to ruin your life finally realize that their safety net is completely gone. 2 weeks after seeing my father in that grocery store, the "For Sale" sign went up in the front yard of my childhood home. For 30 years, my parents had treated that house like an unshakable fortress. It was the place where they coddled Marcus, where they made excuses for every failed job, and where they planned how to squeeze money out of me. Now, because of the mounting legal bills, the probation fees, and the $3,000 restitution my mom had to pull from her retirement fund, they couldn't keep up with the property taxes and maintenance. When Marcus realized our parents were downsizing to a tiny 2-bedroom rental apartment outside the city, he completely lost his mind. He didn't care that our parents were struggling, he was furious because his backup plan was officially destroyed. He actually had the audacity to call my building manager, Joe, from a burner phone, trying to ask if any units in my building were opening up for rent. Joe didn't even let him finish the sentence. He just said, "Son, your name is on a permanent trespass list for this entire square block," and hung up on him. Now here's where I'd have lost it. Marcus genuinely thought that after everything he did, after trying to break my deadbolt on my birthday, time would just magically erase his actions. That's the thing about toxic family members, they expect you to hold a grudge for about a week, and then go right back to being their financial doormat. When they realize you've changed the lock on your life permanently, they don't get remorseful, they get desperate. Have you ever seen a family member realize too late that they completely burned their bridge with you? Let me know in the comments below. While Marcus was panicking over his moving situation, my mom tried one final, desperate maneuver to get under my skin. She couldn't text me directly because of the restraining order, so she posted a massive, passive-aggressive status on Facebook. It was this long, dramatic post about how some children forget who raised them, and how money changes people when they forget family values. She thought she was going to get a tidal wave of sympathy from her friends and former neighbors. What she didn't realize was that word had already spread about the court diversion agreement and the $3,000 restitution check. Instead of getting showered with support, her post was flooded with comments from old family friends asking why she instructed her son to pick her daughter's lock on her birthday. One of my mom's closest lifelong friends actually commented, "Brenda, you enablement of Marcus is what brought you here. Leave Erin alone." My mother was so embarrassed by the public backlash that she deleted her entire Facebook account within 2 hours. Wait, read that part again, because watching someone's fake victim narrative collapse in front of their own social circle is absolute poetry. She realized that no matter how much she twisted the narrative, the truth, supported by police reports and security footage, was completely bulletproof. Is there any better feeling than watching a manipulator's public smear campaign backfire on them completely? Drop your thoughts down below. By the end of that summer, the dust had finally settled into a quiet, peaceful routine. My parents moved into their small rental 40 miles away, stripped of the influence and wealth they used to lord over everyone. Marcus was working double shifts at the warehouse, finally learning what it takes to earn an honest paycheck without a safety net under him. His ex-girlfriend had officially moved on, leaving him to face fatherhood on a strict court-mandated child support schedule that took a third of his weekly pay. And as for me, I celebrated my 34th birthday a year later in that very same city, surrounded by real friends, loyal tenants, and business partners who actually respected my boundaries. No sneaky whispers across the table. No stolen keys. No hidden agendas. Just complete, undeniable peace. I took the extra revenue from my fully occupied building and bought a second investment property 2 towns over, officially building the real estate portfolio my parents always dreamed of, but never had the discipline to earn. I proved to myself, and to everyone who tried to tear me down, that when you stand your ground and enforce your legal rights, you don't lose family, you just lose the dead weight holding you back. Wait, let's talk about the moment where the long-term emotional impact of cutting off your entire immediate family finally settles in. Because people on the internet love to make revenge sound like a non-stop victory lap where you just flex your money and laugh forever. I'll be completely honest with you, around month 8 after the trial, when the winter holidays rolled around, I had a moment where I struggled with this one for a bit. I was sitting in my living room, looking at the Christmas tree I had decorated all by myself in Unit 2A. For 32 years of my life, Christmas meant going over to my parents' house, buying expensive gifts for Marcus that he barely thanked me for, and listening to my mom brag about his potential, while ignoring everything I had accomplished. Now, for the first time in my entire life, my phone was completely silent on Christmas Eve. No texts from my dad asking me to pick up extra groceries. No calls from my mom telling me to pay for Marcus's new coat. Just pure, unbroken silence. And for about 10 minutes, I felt this strange ache in my chest, asking myself, was I too harsh? Should I have just let him take the key and cleared it up later? Asterisk. Now here's where I caught myself. I literally had to open my file cabinet, pull out the police hallway transcript, and read my mother's exact words back to myself out loud. Use the toolkit from the trunk, Marcus. Just get inside before she finishes her dessert. Asterisk. The second those words left my mouth, that little moment of guilt evaporated into thin air. I wasn't the one who broke the family on my birthday. I was just the one who stopped letting them use me as a punching bag. Have you ever felt a sudden wave of guilt after cutting off toxic people, only to remember exactly why you had to do it in the first place? Let me know in the comments below. That holiday season ended up being the best one of my entire life. Instead of walking on eggshells around my parents' dinner table, I hosted a holiday potluck in the building courtyard for all 4 of my tenants and my building manager, Joe. We had hot cocoa, swapped stories, and spent hours laughing without a single drop of fake family drama. I realized that night that family isn't something you're born into by default. Family is something you build with people who respect your peace, honor your boundaries, and show up for you without an ulterior motive. Meanwhile, 40 miles away, my brother was discovering what life looks like when nobody is around to bail you out. Because Marcus had a criminal record on his background check from the misdemeanor break-in, his options were extremely limited. He couldn't get approved for standard apartment leases without a massive co-signer, and my parents' fixed income from selling their home wasn't enough to back him anymore. He was stuck renting a tiny, damp room in a shared house with 3 strangers while working 50 hours a week at the distribution center. When his baby was born that winter, his ex-girlfriend made it crystal clear that he was only allowed supervised visits until he could prove he had stable, independent housing. My father actually tried to send me an email through a business account I forgot to block, begging me to let Marcus sign a lease in one of my properties so he could get joint custody of his kid. My father wrote, "Erin, he's a father now. Please, just give him a second chance so he can show the custody judge he has a proper home." Asterisk. Wait, read that line again, because the level of audacity is staggering. He wanted me to put the man who tried to drill out my deadbolt back into my own building, risking my safety and my tenant's safety, just so Marcus could check a box for family court. Would you ever let a family member who tried to rob you live in your property just because they had a baby? Drop your verdict below. I didn't even reply to the email. I simply took a PDF copy of his message, forwarded it straight to my attorney, and had him issue a formal cease and desist letter to my father for violating the spirit of the communication boundaries. My attorney made it very simple for them. Any further attempt to contact me for housing, money, or legal favors would result in an immediate petition to turn the temporary order of protection into a permanent civil injunction. That final legal warning completely severed the last thread connecting us. Over the next year, I focused entirely on my own life, my real estate business, and my personal peace. I paid off the remaining balance on my multi-family mortgage 4 years early, officially owning a high-value urban asset free and clear at 34 years old. I started traveling, took the vacations I had put off for a decade while saving money, and finally built a life where I didn't have to hide my success out of fear that my family would feel entitled to take it from me. Looking back at that high-end steakhouse dinner on my 33rd birthday, I can see the whole picture so clearly now. My mother thought she was whispering a secret master plan across a white tablecloth to steal my apartment. She thought I was just the quiet, obedient daughter who would cry, surrender, and let her golden brother walk all over her. She had no idea that her greedy little whisper was the exact trigger that set me free. It's crazy how time has a way of settling the score without you ever having to lift a single finger for revenge. 2 years after that fateful birthday dinner, I received a short, formal letter in the mail from my former attorney. Marcus had finally completed his court-mandated community service and anger management courses, officially closing his diversion file. He was still working entry-level shifts, living in a small rented room, and co-parenting on a strict legal schedule. My parents had settled into their small rental apartment, living a quiet, modest life, completely isolated from the high-end social circles my mother used to try so hard to impress. They didn't get the luxury multi-unit building. They didn't get to live off my hard work. They just got the exact reality that their own entitlement created: a quiet room, a broken family dynamic, and a hard lesson in consequences. Sitting here today, looking out at the city from my living room window in the very building they tried to steal, I don't feel anger anymore. I just feel a deep, solid sense of peace. I think this whole story says something really important about human nature and family. Toxic people often mistake your quietness for weakness, and your generosity for an open invitation to exploit you. They assume that just because you love them or share a last name, you will always back down when they push. But true justice isn't about screaming, making a scene, or sinking to their level. It's about having the courage to set an unshakable boundary, let the legal system work, and walk away clean. Silence and self-respect really are the ultimate revenge, because when you refuse to play their dirty games, you force them to consume themselves with their own choices. What do you think about how Erin handled her birthday dinner betrayal? Did her mother and brother get what they deserved, or was executing a legal trap and cutting them off completely too harsh? Drop your verdict down in the comments section below. I read and reply to as many of your takes as I can. If you love this story, don't forget to drop a like and subscribe to Unspoken Confession ***. I post a brand new narrative every single day. Thanks for watching, stay safe, and I'll see you in tomorrow's story. Wait, let's fast forward 5 full years from that birthday dinner, because time has a way of showing you who people truly are once all the noise and drama fade away. I was sitting in my brand new home office on the top floor of my third investment property, looking over my annual tax documents. My real estate portfolio had grown to 12 fully occupied units, providing total financial security for the rest of my life. And then, out of nowhere, an official legal envelope arrived in my mailbox from the county probate and court office. It wasn't a lawsuit, and it wasn't a threat. It was an official notification that the 5-year civil order of protection between myself, my parents, and Marcus had officially expired. The state was writing to ask if I wanted to file for a permanent lifetime renewal. I sat at my desk with the pen in my hand, staring at that piece of paper for a long time. I struggled with this one for a bit, because 5 years is a long time, and a part of me wondered if anyone in that family had actually grown up or changed. Now here's where I learned the truth. I picked up the phone and called my former building manager, Joe, who still manages my first downtown complex. I asked him if he had heard anything through the local neighborhood grapevine about Marcus or my parents over the last few years. Joe gave a long sigh and said, "Erin, you made the right call 5 years ago, and nothing has changed. Would you have renewed a legal protection order after 5 years, or would you have let it expire to see if your family changed? Let me know in the comments below." Joe told me that Marcus had spent the last 5 years jumping from one temporary job to another, still complaining to anyone who would listen that his sister ruined his life. He never took accountability for holding the lockpicks on my birthday. He never took accountability for his own financial failures. In his mind, he was still the victim of an unfair world, living in a small rented house, paying court-ordered child support, and relying on our elderly parents to help pay his monthly grocery bills. My parents had used up almost every single dollar from the sale of their childhood home to keep Marcus afloat, sacrificing their own retirement comfort just to shield their 38-year-old golden child from real adulthood. Wait, read that part again in your head, because it reveals the saddest truth about enabling behavior. My parents didn't just ruin their relationship with me, they ruined Marcus by never allowing him to fail, learn, and grow into a real man. They fed his entitlement until it swallowed their entire family whole. Do you think enabling parents eventually realize they ruined their favorite child, or do they take that delusion to the grave? Drop your thoughts down below. I signed the paperwork right then and there, requested the permanent lifetime civil injunction, and mailed it back to the court clerk. I didn't do it out of anger or revenge. I did it out of absolute peace and self-preservation. I realized that closing a door on toxic family isn't a temporary punishment you give them until they apologize, it's a permanent lifestyle choice to protect your own happiness. Today, my life is filled with people who love me for who I am, not for what they can take from me. I own my time, I own my home, and most importantly, I own my own story. They thought they were going to change the locks on my life that night at the steakhouse, but all they ended up doing was locking themselves out of my future forever. Thank you so much for sticking through this entire extended journey with me on Unspoken Confession. If Erin's story taught us anything, it's that standing up for yourself against toxic family is never wrong, no matter what anyone else tells you. What is your absolute final verdict on Erin's choice to renew the restraining order permanently? Drop your thoughts down in the comments section. I read and heart as many of your comments as possible. If you haven't already, make sure to hit that like button, share this video, and click subscribe so you never miss a brand new story tomorrow. Take care of yourselves, set your boundaries high, and I'll see you in the next one.